The U.S. Department of Justice recently published a statement about the Shanquella Robinson case, which has people asking a lot of questions about which autopsy to believe. One that was completed right after her passing in a country whose best interests would have been served by covering up a traumatic injury? Or should they believe an already compromised autopsy that was completed 3 weeks later after embalming in a state in which the alleged suspects may have strong ties? These questions are leading some to think that a third autopsy is needed, including Shanquella's mom, Salamandra Robinson.
But I was disappointed because the simple fact is that they had enough evidence due to the video that was online, and they said it wasn't enough evidence, but I don't believe. And then they said that they don't know what was the cause of her death, but the cause of her death was due to the fight, from what we could see. And she said she didn't have a broken neck, and she also died from the swelling on the brain, but she also was beaten. So you can give me I feel that someone should have been arrested due to that, but they're trying to say that it didn't. So I might have to have her body exhumed because we need another autopsy. I feel that they should have took this case and took it serious when it first happened. They didn't step up to the plate and do what they needed to do from the very beginning. They said it was out of their hands, but it looked like to me they didn't try to do anything, and they really failed my family, as being the FBI and the government here. We has really been failed, because my daughter didn't deserve to die like that, and brother was in Mexico or wherever it was, and they need to make a law, let people know that you can't go out of town and do nothing to someone and come back and think that you's okay with it. There was a video, everybody's seen the video. So there should have been some charges should have been made. And I'm talking about here in the United States.
After over 5 months of being sidelined by the FBI, Shanquella Robinson's family and attorneys received the disappointing news that the FBI would not be pressing charges against the Cabo Six, because after their supposedly detailed and thorough investigation, there was a lack of evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that a federal crime had been committed.
If you wait till 5 months after someone committed a crime, I'm not a trained investigator, but I would imagine that the people would have time, if they were involved, allegedly, in a crime, they would have the opportunity and time and space to delete text messages if that's what they wanted to do, to talk to each other about the case. Which is why, generally speaking, in investigations, once you know there's an issue, you immediately and swiftly investigate to prevent delays that would prevent discrepancies, that would prevent justice from being served. And so that's why it's so disheartening that the U.S. authorities allowed there to be such a delay in this case.
The U.S. Department of Justice released a statement around noon on April 12, 2023 that stated, "Based on the results of the autopsy, and after a careful deliberation and review of the investigative materials by both U.S. Attorney's offices, federal prosecutors informed Ms. Robinson's family that the available evidence does not support a federal prosecution. They also said it is important to reassure the public that experienced federal agents and seasoned prosecutors extensively reviewed the available evidence and have concluded that federal charges cannot be pursued. But the government is prepared to review and examine new information related to the investigation should it become available." This condescending brush-off was designed to basically make us doubt all the information that our own eyes and common sense have processed about this tragedy. But instead, it assures that our cries for justice will be even louder. Attorney Sue Ann Robinson held a press conference on behalf of Shanquella's family after this disappointing but sadly unsurprising news was received. and reminded supporters that unfortunately, these tactics are nothing new when it comes to securing justice for those who look a certain way. Families like Shanquella's have had to carve out their own paths for justice before the system works as it should for them. And the delay, mishandling, and fobbing off that this family experienced at the hands of officials will not stop the mission for justice. During the press conference, Attorney Robinson was able to shed some light on the evidence that was reviewed during the FBI investigation, revealing that a second autopsy was performed in the U.S. after embalming had already taken place, which concluded that although there was swelling on the brain and a forehead injury which was consistent with blunt force trauma, they were not able to determine the cause of death. The report would go on to detail the same bruising and ruptured vessels noted in the initial autopsy from Mexico. But the glaring difference was that according to the new autopsy, there was no evidence of any disruption of the spinal column alignment or subluxation. In an attempt to explain why there was such a huge discrepancy between the Mexican autopsy, which was completed on October 30th, 2022, just a day after Shanquella's last day, and this new autopsy, which was conducted on November 17th, almost 3 weeks later, the medical examiner noted that Mexico only conducted a partial autopsy, while the U.S. performed a complete autopsy. Leaving aside the idea that an autopsy can hardly be considered complete when the very act of positioning the body and setting body features in place before embalming compromises any autopsy performed afterwards, most people are questioning how anyone could see the various bruises, injuries, and abrasions on Shanquella's body, have video evidence that she had been attacked several hours prior to her passing, and still say that the cause of death was undetermined. Shanquella's family is now being told by the Department of Justice that although the U.S. won't be pressing charges, Mexico is quite free to take action, which begs the question, if you have made this case a priority and have actually communicated with Mexico in order to get witness statements and other evidence for your investigation, why are you asking the family to reach out to Mexico for justice, when according to Mexican officials, they submitted everything needed to Interpol and the U.S. back in November 2022 in order to secure extradition for the primary aggressor, and have received no response from the U.S. regarding their request? The very notes in the autopsy show how easy it is for the two countries to communicate and cooperate, and that the U.S. medical examiner was able to contact his Mexican counterpart on April 3rd and conduct a video conference with that medical examiner and the lab to get the complete results of the toxicology report. The findings in this new autopsy and the lack of urgency, transparency, and the absurdity of an investigation not being opened until months after a crime was committed, only to be closed shortly after with absolutely no resolve, just shows even more how much a high level of diplomatic intervention is needed to achieve justice in this case.
Because our belief has always been from the beginning that it's always going to be bigger than the local feds in Charlotte. That it's going to take a high level of diplomatic intervention because heads of state have to talk to heads of state. That's just the bottom line. It's a transnational criminal case, and so it's going to take a little bit more, especially because it involves one of us. Everyone is ping-ponging against everyone else. So first, you have to meet with this person in order to meet with this person in order to have a meeting with this. So we have now completed this piece. which again, we're disappointed by what was said today, but we're not deterred. So that's what I'm saying. We're continuing on the same path to the rally on May 19th and to have meetings with heads of state.
We are not deterred in our mission for justice because, unfortunately, delayed justice is nothing new for people who look a certain way. But as history has shown, regardless of the lies we are fed, deliberate obstruction and sabotage, or utter indifference of those sworn to duty, our own diligence carves out the path to justice, and it's no difference in this instance. There will be justice for Shanquella Robinson.